well, you just said with the last hot seater that this, in the deepest, deepest sense, is the leading edge. Why did Jerry leave now, and how is it perfect for his and our greater expansion and joy?
Because there is very little separation between the physical part of the leading edge and the non-physical part of the leading edge. That's really the point that we're wanting to make with all of this. In other words, we are all so in this together that it makes little difference. And humans are really hung up on this death thing. In other words, most of you are so worried about death that you don't really live.
Yeah.
It's time for a bridge.
Yeah.
It's time for a bridge.
A bridge. A bridge. That's interesting. Can you say more on that?
Not really.
Okay.
Yeah.
You brought it.
Figure it out. We're really sort of tired of you leaving all the answers to us.
Yeah, right. That's great.
Well, in the sense that, and you've heard us say this many times, that whenever someone makes their transition into non-physical, there is always more asking, more interest in the interaction. And Esther has had wonderful interaction with that which is Abraham, but she's been wondering, and many of you have too, in other words, what is it like to reemerge into non-physical?
Yeah.
What's it really like? And so over the weeks and months and years, there will be much more definition of that coming, just because there's much more question about that coming. But the most important thing is that none of you have come forth to be in these physical bodies forever. Yeah. You've come to let life inspire you, and sometimes you reach the place where the non-physical clarity is the greater inspiration. In other words, when your questions have been answered, when your life experience is full, because you never stop reaching for that which is more, you see.
It's on that then, the non-physical, the words you just used?
This is the thing that we want you to hear, and this speaks it more than anything ever, because you all know the intensity of the desire of the one that you know as Jerry. Mm-hmm. So when you accept that inquisitiveness is not gone because he's reemerged into non-physical, that interest in life is not waning but actually inflamed. In other words, it's that sort of bridge. It's to help you to understand, because as much as we stand here as exactly the same representation of non-physical energy, you still think we're dead.
Yeah, I hear you.
And you still think we're different than that which you are.
Right.
Humans have a hard time accepting that when source is flowing, that it flows through the physical extensions of all that you are. Right. And that there is not a separation. And so it will be a personal discovery for Esther, certainly has already become one for Jerry, and for any who are wanting to take the trail along. Esther was sitting and editing the Twice Monthly, sitting at the kitchen counter in San Antonio. And her sister was there, and Becky said, "Look behind you." And there was a bird, a big bird, not a hummingbird, a big bird, acting like a hummingbird, hovering right outside the window, looking right over Esther's shoulder, hovering. Birds don't do that. It is aerodynamically incorrect. It is incorrect. You don't get in a little corner as a bird and just hover ordinarily, unless you have been inspired by non-physical consciousness to take a peek at something you're interested in seeing. You see? So there are all kinds of those experiences that will help all of you to realize that there is no separation between what you call non-physical and what you call physical.
Nice.
And in this process, perhaps there will be a little diminishment of the dread factor.
Yeah, wonderful.
The dread factor of something that is non-existent. You might as well get over it. Do you know anyone who will not die?
Right.
You don't. You don't know anyone. 100% of you stand in resistance to something that is absolutely inevitable. It's time to get over the death.
Woo! Yeah.
It's time to get over it. It's time to get over it. It's time to feel the fullness of who you are.
Fantastic. Fantastic. Well, this wasn't one of the questions, but it was something that was in the back of my head. And since we're in a unique environment here, and since there is no separation, you've done such a fantastic job at times with certain people, certain environments, to hear from that other side. I have been wondering, now or going forward, could we hear from Jerry?
You'll hear a lot from Jerry. You'll hear a lot from him. When we looked around the room and said, "You look good," that was Jerry.
Oh, nice. Fantastic.
Because we've never thought you looked particularly good.
Yeah, that's fantastic. Yeah, that was a new line. I was surprised at that. That was fantastic. I'm like, okay.
And those of you who have been hanging around, you'll recognize Jerry's input. And in some cases, it will be hard to separate it because he's been hanging around with us, as have you, while physically focused, but it will be evident.
Wonderful. Well, on the topic...
And at times, obnoxious and annoying.
Great. Well, that's fantastic on that metaphor of the bridge.
Because he is that sort of bridge. In other words, we have been non-physically focused, and you have to understand that everything that we are... You're going to enjoy this. So, Esther, in her... alignment, and over time, don't read your notes, listen to us.
Okay, all right.
That was Jerry.
What?
That was Jerry.
Hi.
He wants to say... Esther, in her alignment, has managed, and in her meditation through years, has managed to focus us into a beingness that is evident to you. Well, the same thing happens when you are born into your physical body. You focus consciousness into a beingness. And we want you to feel that. It's focusing consciousness into a beingness. Now, it's easy for you to acknowledge that because, as we were saying earlier, there you sit in those clumps. Irreverent, aren't we? There you are in those clumps, those individual personalities. But when you interact with each other, your attention, your expectation, in the attitude of causation that we were talking about earlier, where there is a collaboration or a collective coming together, you literally focus personalities from those people that you interact with. You see it in children. They behave differently with that person and that person. So there is a focusing of consciousness. Now, most humans don't want to even consider that. You want to give complete causation to the kid who spilled the milk, or complete causation to whatever the personality is in that person. You shouldn't act like that. When we would like to say there is a group dynamic going on here that is causing that behavior to be focused or summoned or exuded or extracted or attracted. In other words, that's going on all the time. And so now there's this non-physical consciousness, this non-physical collective consciousness, this infinite intelligence, which you all focus into being. Jerry got this ball rolling in a very powerful way because he had lived so much life and had so many questions. And when he began to interact with what he knew to be infinite intelligence, that his life had focused so much of it into being, you see. And so the questions began flowing. Esther said she was glad to see you here, and she was glad to see you here because, as she was looking, because she acknowledges that there are many who will continue that summoning of consciousness in the way that Jerry got it started. And it is so much more global now, because now we've laid this baseline. People understand that, as Seth said, who got it started even before, you create your own reality. And Jerry said, if that is so, how is it so? Seth said, your point of power is in the now. And Jerry said, if that is so, how is that so? And so we've spent the last 26 years answering that question for Jerry and others. That's a question that we really want to talk about here today, and you are bringing it right out to the leading edge again, because it's the focusing of consciousness forward, you see. So you want to feel a certain amount of responsibility for what you're extracting from your grandchildren or from your children or from your government. Take some of the credit for what you are extracting from your government. In your criticism of them, you get more of it. In your appreciation of it, you get more of it. In your attention to anything, you get more of it. So now, here is Esther. She's been focusing us into being with the help of Jerry only in the beginning and many like you as it began to evolve. And so now here is this consciousness known as Abraham, and you have a level of expectation about what it is. You know we're infinite intelligence, or at least you think we are. We are. We are. In the sense that we have access to any thought that you activate enough to bring into focus. In other words, you are the creation of what goes on here. The collective consciousness and expectation of that which you are is what summons this. So you all have a sort of attitude or expectation of what the non-physical is. Well, Jerry's introduction or reemergence into it adds a different dynamic, at least for Esther, because Esther doesn't want Jerry to be Abraham. She's already got Abraham, you see. She wants his unique introduction to it. Well, what's going to make that? What's going to cause Esther to feel? Is Jerry going to assert himself into this
No, we
mix?
have to keep it alive, the essence?
No, it isn't that way at all. You don't have to. You can't help it. But it is Jerry or Abraham. Are we going to assert our knowledge into a forum like this? Or is your expectation, is your wondering, is your inquiry, are you the ones that focus that into being, you see? And so, and that's unsettling. That's unsettling a bit to someone like Esther. Waiting for the unsettling to leave. But when she remembers what law of attraction is, and she remembers what the power of focus is, so now that's that bridge we were talking about. She has that unique perspective that summons specifically. That's that bridge.
And we're part of that summoning, and how? Yeah.
Well, we would suggest that you just get on with what you're getting on with. In other words, be who you are. Let your life experience, in other words, there is no obligation ever. No obligation. First of all, you can't separate physical from non-physical. And there's too much of an integration. There will never be, it is not possible to ever separate that.
But what's unsettling about what just transpired there? If she knows, we know, and we're in essence, it seems like creating a
practice
legend.
Vibration. It's what we were talking about at the very first question. Practice vibration. It is normal.
There's no separation.
There is no separation, but humans have practiced the feeling of it. And so certain things trigger the feeling of separation, and when the feeling of separation is there, then the separation is experienced. It's really as simple as that.
So actually communicating even to Esther, his partner, and so forth, is actually an totally appropriate thing, even though it may be unsettling. It's still to continue that drawing and that recollecting. And what are you meaning by the summoning and it's unsettling to hear about Jerry? I didn't understand what that meant.
Only unsettling for Esther at some times, in other words, because of the feeling of loss.
Okay, got it. All right. Well, speaking of...
Which is bogus.
Yeah, but totally fine.
Normal.
No, yeah.
But out of the vortex.
Yeah. Right.
And unnecessary.
There we go.
Yes. So most people, when they're speaking of accountability, they're saying to another, your behavior, and more important, my attention to your behavior, has taken me out of the vortex into a horrible feeling place. And you need to do something different so that I can feel better. Esther said that to Jerry for a few days after he made his transition. She was so mad at him. She was just so mad at him because he was missing. And she just thought that was ridiculous. She just couldn't come to terms with it. And then after a few days of realizing that, what was she really asking him to do? Undo that? And so she realized there must be another way. There must be another way. And we want you all to know that there is always another way, and it's an easy way. It's finally not making somebody else accountable for how you feel. Isn't that the ultimate? Damn it, Jerry, you're dead and I feel bad. Do something about it. Become undead. Well, of course, there is no dead, but it took her a while to remember that and to find it again, you see.